Part 51. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 539. ID Con 1693664. Next to the Grandette Mansion, Rog and Luffy are ready to act. Hey, how are you going to seal off this mansion? Luffy asked Rogue curiously. Rog took out a handful of seeds from the backpack on his back and said, "You will know soon." Rog grasped these seeds tightly, and all the power of the huge plant fruit gathered by his arms was transmitted to Lian's palm and entered these seeds. "Grow as much as you like." Rog threw the seeds towards the huge mansion. The seeds quickly began to grow and became thorns. These thorns grew thick rapidly and attached to the wall of the Grandette mansion. The thorns are tens of meters long and as thick as iron chains. Rog quickly went to the wall of Grandette's mansion again, and continued to grab these thick thorns with both hands. The thorns grew further, originally tens of meters long, and now they crossed each other like a net. The thorns quickly surrounded the entire Grandette mansion. In the end, Rog panted and half knelt down. He looked at the thick thorns covering the Grandette mansion and said, "These thorns are like an iron net that completely seals this huge mansion." The Grandette mansion really seemed to be enclosed by an iron net. The gaps in the net formed by these thick thorns can only allow cats and dogs to get out. Moreover, the thorns on the thorns are still very sharp. I am afraid that animals like cats and dogs will be seriously injured if they encounter them. What's even more terrifying is that these thorny thorns are already as hard as iron. It can be said that the Grandette mansion is now sealed with a veritable iron net, and no one can go out. However, Rog used the power of the huge plant fruit again, and the astonishing amount of power he spent using the tunnel stakes before, made Rog feel very exhausted. Fortunately, when I used the tunnel stakes just now, I found that there was no tunnel underneath this huge mansion. So you can rest assured. Now Grandette in Grandette's mansion has become a bird in a cage, waiting for Sanji and Robin to capture them. However, Rog manipulated and created the thorns to intertwine and grow into a huge thorn net to seal the entire Grandette mansion, which quickly attracted the attention of the security forces guarding the Grandette mansion. What happened? Why did so many strange plants suddenly grow around the mansion? It's like a huge network. Hundreds of elite security forces all looked at the Grandette mansion. A colonel commanding the security forces guarding the Grandette mansion saw this scene. What is going on? Could it be that the mansion was attacked? The colonel said in surprise. After the colonel saw the mansion being attacked in this way, he gave the order quickly. The first squad, the second squad, and the third squad quickly go to support. The big troops will arrive soon, the colonel gave an order. The adjutant quickly communicated the order through the phone bug. 3 small teams, each with 50 elite officers and soldiers, quickly surrounded the Grandette mansion, which was covered by a thorn net. Near the Grandette mansion, Roger and Luffy saw more than 100 security officers and soldiers rushing towards them. "They're coming," Luffy said. "It's a good time, there's nothing else to say, just fight," Rog said. The security forces officers and soldiers saw Roger and Luffy. 2 enemies found and ready to shoot. The security forces aimed their rifles and submachine guns at Roger and Luffy. Bang 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 bang. Intensive bullets shot at the 2 of them. The walnut armor on Rog was as hard as steel and blocked swarms of bullets. The bullets scattered a large number of sparks from the walnut armor on his body. Luffy's body was dented from the beating. The body of the rubber man will not be pierced by these bullets. "Give it back to you." Luffy didn't move his body, just relying on the elastic property of the rubber to bounce dozens of bullets back. What? Crap. The bullet actually bounced back. Several security forces were hit and fell to the ground. However, Luffy flew these bullets back indiscriminately, and did not aim at them. The number of people who can be killed is also limited. Okay, "It's my turn." Luffy waved his fist and hit the head of a security soldier with an officer's badge on his black military uniform. After Luffy's fist was punched out, it stretched out and hit the security officer. Click. There was a harsh sound of bone shattering, and the security force officer's facial bones were shattered and he flew out. Seeing Luffy's attack, some of the other security force officers looked terrified. Could this guy be the Straw Hat Boy who fought in the port area before? One of the security forces said. Earlier, the Straw Hat Pirates fought a battle in the area near the port of Magic Valley City. Let the security forces know their general fighting style and ability. For example, the brutal swordsman who kills like hemp, the female monster who can grow groups of arms, the weird man who manipulates plants, and the terrible monster who can change between civet cats, orangutans, and reindeer. There are also rubber figures that can stretch their bodies. These are spread quickly among the security forces like horror legends. Many security forces have already judged that the funny boy with an afro and wearing a child's suspenders is the Straw Hat Kid. Rog also fought quickly, and he was very tired due to the impact of the plant fruit power that was severely consumed in his body just now. But even so, we have to fight on. Roger took out another small cactus. This cactus was previously collected from the Alabasta Desert. Rog also modified it before. Cactus thorn gun, grow out quickly. Rog clenched the cactus with both arms, and continued to concentrate the power of the plant fruit in his body to inject it into it. This small cactus grows rapidly, and the original cactus has changed in appearance. It first becomes more oval, and then a part similar to a gun handle appears below, and a trigger appears. The oval part resembles the barrel of a submachine gun. Rog picked up the cactus lance that looked like a weird submachine gun, and aimed it at the three security forces who were rushing towards him. How could this guy use such a weapon? Could it be that he's the guy who manipulates plants? Roger pointed the cactus spear at the three security forces and pulled the trigger. Buzz buzz buzz. Spikes shot out from the body of the cactus thorn gun. These cactus spikes are fast and powerful. A security guard was quickly hit with several spikes on his face. These spikes were as long as fingers and as sharp as steel nails. It's basically a cactus-style nail gun. The spike pierced the vigilante's face and shot through his mouth. Even the eyeballs are pierced. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 540. ID Con 1693665. Ah! The security guard screamed in agony. Two more spikes pierced his throat, and blood gushed from his throat. The security guard clutched his throat in pain, feeling unable to breathe, and finally fell to the ground and convulsed. A spike from Rog's cactus lance hit another vigilante, but this time in the chest. More than a dozen spikes hit the security guard one after another, as if being shot by more than a dozen steel needles. He fell to the ground and never got up again. Seeing that the situation was not good, the last security force quickly took out a long-handled fuse grenade from his waist. ZZ. The fuse was pulled apart, and this long-handled fuse grenade was about to explode. The security forces waved long-handled fuse grenades to throw at Rog. But Rog aimed his arm with a cactus lance and shot. What? Several spikes stabbed the security soldier's arm, and after a scream, his hand relaxed due to pain. The long-handled fuse grenade fell to his feet. Boom. Then there was an explosion, and the policeman was left bloody. The black military uniform was mixed with blood and charred flesh, blending together. It looks disgusting for a while. Rog killed 3 vigilantes one after another with cactus spears. Because Rog used a lot of plant fruit power before, it consumed a lot of body. So now you need to use this shooting weapon. Because this can reduce consumption and kill the enemy with less effort. Some security forces saw Rog using a cactus thorn gun, so they discovered that Rog was actually using a plant-based weapon. Isn't this guy the enemy in the city near the port who can control plants? He is also on the Navy's wanted list. He seems to be called Plant Warrior Rog or something. The bounty is almost million. Really? We are no match at all like this. Looking at the armor he is wearing, it looks like it is some kind of walnut. But its hardness is comparable to steel. Otherwise, how could he stop our bullets? And the gun he was holding looked like a cactus. Why are there such strange enemies? However, these security forces are well-trained and well-equipped elite after all. They quickly prepared groups of long-handled fuse grenades, and these long-handled fuse grenades were pulled away and quickly thrown towards Rog. "Blow him up with a grenade," a security force officer ordered. More than a dozen long-handled fuse grenades were pulled apart, and were thrown towards Rog with a buzzing sound. Boom, 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 boom. Rog was covered by flames and smoke from the explosion. After this violent explosion, the security forces looked at the gradually dissipating gunpowder smoke. Among the dissipating gunpowder smoke, there was still a person standing there. Rog was wearing walnut armor, but the armor was slightly blackened and had some surface cracks. But basically no big damage. Why is it so strong? The hardness is really comparable to steel. This walnut armor was not destroyed by so many grenade explosions. How could this happen? The security officers and soldiers were all shocked. Of course, the long-handled fuse grenades they threw were all anti-infantry grenades. The power against objects with the hardness of steel is indeed limited. What a group of annoying guys, but they are indeed well trained, Rog said. Rog looked at the cactus spear in his hand. Although his walnut armor was not destroyed by the explosion of the long-handled fuse grenades. But the cactus thorn gun was seriously damaged. Rog quickly used the plant fruit power in his body again, and these plant fruit power quickly repaired the cactus spear. After fixing the cactus lance, Rog aimed at the enemy. Buzz 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 buzz. Dense spikes shot out. An officer of the security force was shot in the body, and his face and chest were covered with spikes, like a giant hedgehog nailed full of steel nails. Gudong. The security force officer fell to the ground without saying a word. Blood flowed out of his face from the wound pierced by the spikes, but coupled with the completely frozen expression of fear, several security forces around him were so frightened that their legs trembled. "We can't win at all." Several security forces quickly ran away. But they were soon shot by an officer with a submachine gun. Bang 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 bang. The bullets hit the bodies of the fleeing vigilantes, and they fell dead. The police officers who shot and killed the fleeing security forces shouted at the other security forces, "If there are deserters, they will end up like them. We don't need to defeat the enemy, we just need to drag on to fight. Until the reinforcements arrive, we have completed our mission." The remaining security forces were suppressed, and they quickly gave up the idea of escaping and continued to fight. But they now know that their mission is to stall the battle, waiting for more support to arrive. So the remaining security forces dispersed and supported each other with firepower from a longer distance to contain Rog. "It's broken into pieces, but I'm not afraid of this." Rog continued to attack the enemy with the cactus lance. Luffy is crazy during the battle. Robot ally. Luffy quickly stretched his arms and legs and entangled a vigilante. This security soldier was controlled like a puppet by Luffy. After turning around, he pointed his handheld submachine gun at the security soldiers and fired at them. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The bullets fired from the submachine gun knocked down two other security forces. "Shoot at the controlled person," a security officer ordered. More than a dozen security forces aimed at Luffy and the security force with submachine guns and rifles. Thousands of bullets flew past. Luffy's body is naturally safe and sound, but the security force he controlled was beaten into a sieve. Luffy threw off the body of the vigilante and continued to fight. Rubber. Seal. Luffy raised his foot and kicked it out. The leg stretched rapidly, and finally hit a security officer, only to hear the sound of cracking bones on his face, and the security officer flew out. When he stopped, the other vigilantes saw that Luffy's feet made a huge footprint on his face. Luffy rushed to the front of the four security forces again, his left arm suddenly extended, and waved towards the four security forces. Rubber. Sickle. After Luffy's left arm stretched out, it cut off the four security forces like a huge sickle. What? The four security forces roared in pain for a while. They were thrown away by Luffy. Finally it fell heavily to the ground. There was a crackling sound of bones breaking when it landed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 541. ID Con 1694477. Luffy continued to exert his powerful fighting abilities vigorously. Rubber. Chain punches. Luffy punched and stretched his arms at the same time. But the fist that was punched out was thrown by Luffy continuously from the root of the arm in a circle. Luffy's fist was also thrown in a circle. The security forces were hit one after another and fell to the ground. What? It hurts. What a weird fist. I never thought there was such a way to fight. The security forces were knocked down by Luffy using this strange move. Luffy looked at the security forces around him, and there were still more than 10 people surrounding him. Okay, let's use a more powerful move. Luffy first put his arms flat, and then began to stretch out, while his body rotated like the center of a circle. Rubber. Top. Luffy was really like a top at this time, starting to spin violently around his body with his body as the center. However, unlike the small range of the top, Luffy's arms can be extended, so the attack range is extremely large. What? Oh! What a powerful move! We can't stand it at all. Really like a top. His body can actually stretch and contract like this. More than a dozen security forces who surrounded them were all hit by Luffy's spinning arm and fell to the ground. Regardless of the fact that Luffy's body is made of rubber, it can stretch freely. The strength is also very huge. The strength of the rotating arms is comparable to the rotation of the tree trunk, enough to knock down the enemies within the range. What a horrible guy! A public security officer said in horror. I am coming. Luffy looked at the security officer and the other officers and soldiers around him. Luffy, who was spinning like a top, actually started to move. What? The security officer and other officers and soldiers said in shock. Luffy quickly approached them and knocked them down in groups. Dong 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 dong. This group of vigilante troops continued to be defeated. Luffy also didn't stop attacking, knocking down a large number of officers and soldiers of the security forces. However, although Luffy's attacks have a large range and are flexible, many of his attacks are knockdowns and only a few are fatal. There are still many security officers and soldiers who can stand up and continue fighting. Rogue continued to engage the vigilante using the cactus spear. The officers and soldiers of the security forces who learned to engage in delaying tactics fought Rogue at a distance. Rogue pointed the cactus spear at a security guard who kept pulling the bolt of his rifle and fired, and pulled the trigger. Buzz 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 buzz. A string of spikes shot out from the cactus spear and hit the security guard. The vigilante fell to the ground and died after receiving more than a dozen spikes on his head and chest. After firing a wave of spikes as big as steel nails, more than a dozen spikes grew out of the body of the cactus spear. They're really tough guys, Rogue said. These security forces are very familiar with the environment here, coupled with their strong cooperation ability. Rogue feels a little difficult. However, these security forces suffered heavy losses after the fierce battle with Rogue and Luffy, and they very much hope that more security forces could come. Reinforcements are finally here. A vigilante officer yelled. About 500 security forces came over for emergency support. These security forces are unusual. They carry more heavy weapons, unlike the previous security forces of more than 100 people. Among them, the colonel who was in charge of commanding and guarding the Grandet mansion personally commanded the battle. "Ready the machine guns," ordered the burly colonel with an exaggerated golden beard. Quickly, about 40 machine guns were quickly set up near the Grandet mansion. The muzzles of the machine guns aimed firmly at Roger and Luffy. "Fire!" Colonel Goldenbeard ordered. More than 40 machine guns shot out terrifying tongues of flame. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The harsh sound of bullets echoed in the air. A dense rain of bullets shot at Roger and Luffy. Rog's walnut armor was hit by dense bullets, and the bullets struck violent sparks. However, although these bullets are dense, they cannot destroy the walnut armor that even shells and bombs cannot destroy. Luffy was hit by dense bullets, and his body sank violently towards the back. "Wow, there's a hail of bullets!" Luffy shouted excitedly. Luffy's body relied on its rubber properties to deflect dozens or hundreds of bullets. Many bullets hit the security forces, but due to the irregular ejection, not too many people were hit. The Golden-Beard colonel saw that the hail of bullets was useless to the two of them, so he also gave new orders. "Stop shooting," ordered Colonel Golden-Beard. More than 40 machine guns stopped firing one after another. Not only failed to kill Rog and Luffy just now, and the bullets bounced back by Luffy also killed more than a dozen security forces. Colonel Goldenbeard issued a new order: use small mortars. Immediately behind the machine guns, a group of vigilante soldiers positioned the small mortars. More than 30 small mortars with a diameter of 30 centimeters were placed. These small artillery shells are centimeters in diameter and 1 meter long infantry mortars, but the barrels are inclined upwards, and there are feed supports below. The soldier in charge of firing can change the inclination of the barrel by adjusting the bracket to bombard the target. Another soldier who is responsible for loading the shells prepares the shells and quickly loads them in. Then the gunner fires, and the mortar shells will be shot out of the barrel in a parabola and fly to the target area. Although it is not very accurate, it still has a great suppression effect on infantry. More than 30 small mortars were quickly loaded with mortar shells. Luffy looked at these security forces and said strangely, "What new weapons are they preparing?" Rog saw those small artillery shells and said, "So they used mortars." The bullets of the security forces didn't work, so they naturally had to use explosive weapons. After more than 30 small mortars were prepared, Colonel Goldenbeard gave the order: "Fire!" The soldiers operating the small mortars pressed the button. Boom 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 boom. The small mortars fired mortar shells in groups. The mortar shells hit the area where Luffy and Roger were. Boom, 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 boom. The area where Luffy and Roger were was hit by the falling mortar shells and exploded quickly. Rubber dot balloon. Luffy inhaled sharply, turning his body into a giant balloon. After turning into a huge balloon, Luffy slammed many mortar shells away. These bounced mortar shells flew back to the security forces in a parabolic trajectory. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 542. ID Con 1694478. The security forces, including Colonel Goldenbeard, were horrified to see a large number of mortar shells being bounced back. Boom, 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 boom. There was a violent explosion among the security forces. Many security forces were flying with flesh and blood. The security forces also retreated instinctively. The Golden-Beard colonel also felt panic for a while. He didn't expect the opponent's strength to be so wicked. At this time, Rog charged in the smoke of the explosion. Rog quickly rushed into the enemy formation. These security forces quickly raised their submachine guns and rifles and fired. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. A barrage of bullets hit Rog. The walnut armor on Rog's body sparked for a while. Rog raised the cactus spear in his hand, aimed at an enemy holding a submachine gun and pulled the trigger. Buzz 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 buzz. Spikes shoot from the cactus lance. Hit the security guard with a submachine gun. The vigilante's chest and abdomen were covered with spikes and he fell to the ground dead. The blood soaked the grass below, dyeing the green grass red. "I'll use your weapons too." Rog took out a long-handled fuse grenade from the killed security guard. Pulling the fuse apart, sparks and white smoke came out of the long-handled fuse grenade. "Give it back to you." Rog threw the long-handled fuse grenade at the 3 security forces. Boom! 3 security forces were blown to the ground, bloody and bloody. Seeing that Rog was difficult to deal with, the other security forces quickly distanced themselves from Rog. However, Rog continued to chase the enemy, using the cactus spear to shoot and kill the security forces. The security forces fell to the ground one by one, but suddenly a huge axe came over. Roger dodged sharply. I saw a burly man with a height of 5 meters standing in front. This big man was also wearing a black security army uniform. But the style looks like that of an army officer. "You bastard, you dared to kill my man. Now let Major Darriggs teach you a lesson." The burly man roared. Major Darriggs takes action. The surrounding security forces said happily. Colonel Goldenbeard also had a happy expression on his face. "Darriggs made a move, so the enemy will suffer," Goldenbeard said confidently. "Not all the security forces are ordinary troops, and some masters with powerful abilities were recruited. This Colonel Darriggs was originally a killer who was running rampant on the Great Airline. He was desperate because he offended his enemies, but he was recruited by the security forces with a lot of money. Strength is absolutely very powerful." Rog looked at the burly Major Darriggs, and said, "Okay, finally a guy with some strength came. I think the other enemies are too weak." Rog aimed his cactus spear at Major Darriggs and shot more than a dozen spikes. Buzz 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 buzz. The spikes struck Darriggs in the chest. But the burly man remained motionless. He carried a huge axe on his shoulders. "Is that all you can do? Shoot out these insignificant little thorns," Major Darriggs said. Major Darriggs himself was a burly man, and his muscles and skin were very hard. Ordinary soldiers are hit by these spikes like high-speed steel nails. But when Major Darriggs was hit by these spikes, it was just like an ordinary person being hit by a cactus thorn, with no great harm. Rog looked at Major Darriggs and said, "Okay, if you like hand-to-hand combat so much, I will accompany you." Rog threw away the cactus spear and took out an iron birch sapling. Rog himself concentrated the plant fruit power in his body, and injected the plant fruit power into the iron birch sapling. After a period of relaxation, Rog was no longer so tired and could engage in hand-to-hand combat. With the concentration of the fruit power of the plant, the iron birch saplings were covered with green light. Then it starts growing rapidly. Iron birch. Great sword. Finally the iron birch sapling grew into a wide sword. This iron birch sword is comparable to the swords used by knights, heavy and powerful. After Rog clenched the iron birch sword with both hands, he was about to fight Major Darriggs. After Major Darriggs saw the iron birch sword in Rog's hand, he said, "This is a plant. It's really surprising. But you have some skills, I will fight with you." Major Darriggs swung a huge axe in his hand and struck. Rog waved the big iron birch sword in his hand to exchange weapons with the opponent. Chong! Darriggs' huge axe that could cut off a bull's head met Rog's iron birch sword. Darriggs's great axe itself is made of steel and is extremely hard, while Rog's iron birch sword is incredibly hard. The hardness of the iron birch tree itself is comparable to steel, and after Rog transformed it with the power of plant fruits, its hardness is even harder than steel. but Rog felt the opponent's amazing strength. Although the opponent was only 5 meters tall and burly, he had seen enemies taller than him before, but the strength that Major Darix used was even comparable to a smaller giant. Rog resisted this blow, but the grass under Rog's feet was all stepped into the soil by Rog, leaving deep footprints, which is enough to show the strength of the opponent's attack. Darix quickly drew back the giant axe, aimed it horizontally at Rog, and slashed at him. Rog blocked the iron birch sword vertically in front of him. Chong! It was another collision between the giant axe and the iron birch sword. Rog was attacked horizontally this time and suffered all the force. He flew more than 10 meters away. Such a powerful force. Roger stood up again and said. Darix laughed out loud. Ha 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 ha, boy, if you dare to fight me with weapons, it's unbelievable for you to think that my strength is comparable to that of a small giant. Rog looked at Darix. The opponent's power was indeed huge. With the huge strength and the hard steel giant axe, if it hits the walnut armor on his body, it is very likely to shatter the walnut armor. In that way, Rog himself was either dead or injured. This enemy must be dealt with caution. Roger said. He clenched the iron birch sword with both hands, ready to fight again. Colonel Goldenbeard, who was observing the battle from a distance, was also very happy to see that Darix quickly achieved initial victory after his appearance. As expected of Major Darix, he has a burly body but possesses great strength. In this way, Darix has great strength but is not big, so he won't be dragged down in his battle because of his oversized body, Colonel Goldenbeard said. In the years when Darix was a killer before joining the security force, he used the giant steel axe in his hand to create 100 tigers that beheaded 100 tigers besieging him. In terms of combat power, Darix is much stronger than Goldenbeard. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 543. ID Con 1695432. Darix continued his fierce battle with Roger. This huge and powerful man wielded a giant steel axe and attacked Rog violently. Rog tried hard to parry, but the opponent's strength was really strong, almost suppressing Rog all the time. Chiang Darix's steel giant axe and Rog's iron birch tree sword exchanged again. Rog thought silently, what a barbaric enemy. Darix continued to swing the giant steel axe several times in a row, forcing Rog to retreat continuously. Rog quickly observed Darix's fighting style during the battle. Darix's combat style is very much like a berserker, just like those warriors among the giants. Of course Darix doesn't have the power and wildness of a real giant. But no matter how strong a person is, there are also weaknesses. If Darix was chopped up physically, he would definitely suffer great harm. Thinking of this, Rog decided to engage in a closer fight. Close combat may be Darix's weakness. Go to hell, you brat, ha ha ha. Darix swung his giant steel axe angrily and continued to slash at Rog. Rog kept dodging or blocking with the iron birch sword. However, Rog quickly approached Darix's right leg after Darix slashed and slashed. At this time, Rog grasped the iron birch sword with both arms and slashed at Darix's right leg. Puff! The big iron birch sword in Rog's hand hit the knee of Darix's right leg. Darix, who was about to take the opportunity to attack, suddenly howled in pain. It hurts me to death. Darix looked up to the sky and howled in pain. Rog took this opportunity to quickly get behind Darix's right leg. This guy's bones are really hard, and his legs haven't been cut off. Rog killed Darix with another blow from the back of his right leg. More blood spattered out. Darix's right leg completely lost its support this time. His burly body was half kneeling on the ground. At this time, Rog did not stop, but continued to swing the iron birch sword at the back of Darix's left leg. Rog exerted all his strength with both arms, combined with the sharpness and hardness of the iron birch sword, he cut Darix's left leg joint with one blow. Darix knelt on his knees this time, and his whole body was severely injured. However, Rog also felt the hardness of Daragiz's body and bones when he attacked. Daragiz's body is as hard as a rock, and his bones are as hard as iron. However, Rog was able to seriously injure him under the attack of the iron birch sword whose hardness surpassed that of steel. Asshole! Although Dariguez knelt on his knees, he still grasped the giant steel axe and slashed towards Rog. But in this case, the strength of Daragiz's attack was greatly slowed down. Chong! Rog brandished the iron birch sword to block Darig's steel axe. If the previous blow was enough to shock Rog back, now Rog was able to withstand this blow. For the human body to exert its full strength, it needs the coordination of the whole body. The joints of Dariguez's knees were severely injured, and his natural strength was greatly slowed down by only relying on his arm strength to slash. Damn you, how dare you attack my knees? Dariguez said angrily. Rog waved the iron birch sword and said, the battle is not up to you now. Rog quickly rushed towards Dariguez's back. Dariguez was on his knees, and he was only able to fight with his upper body. But his waist cannot rotate degrees. Approaching, not everyone is Luffy. Rog reached the back of Dariguez, and suddenly swung the big iron birch sword and chopped it down at the back of Dariguez's neck. Puff! The iron birch sword held tightly by Rog's arm struck Dariguez on the back of the neck. The back of Dariguez's neck was cut off. Although the bones inside were as hard as iron, it was fatal enough. Dariguez's eyeballs bulged rapidly, and his face became extremely ferocious. Lie down with your whole body facing forward. Rog looked at Dariguez, who fell on the ground, and he was also relieved. After such a hard fight, he finally defeated this difficult opponent. No matter what, I finally won, Rog said. The security forces who had watched the whole battle around were shocked when they saw Dariguez was killed. Major Dariguez was killed. No matter how powerful the enemy is, how could he be defeated so quickly? It's simply unimaginable. He can't even win, we will definitely lose. What a terrible enemy. The security forces were terrified. Dariguez was beheaded so quickly, they were all full of fear for Rog. Colonel Goldenbeard looked at Dariguez, who fell to the ground, and said with an extremely ugly face, Major Dariguez was killed. He died so quickly. How could it be like this? Colonel Goldenbeard looked at Rog again, and said full of doubts, how can this person be so powerful? After the death of Major Dariguez in battle, the impact on the morale of the security forces was enormous. And in addition to Rog, there is also Luffy, a difficult enemy. Seeing the dire situation he was facing now, Goldenbeard quickly issued new orders. Equipped with crossbow and ready to shoot. Goldenbeard ordered loudly. Quickly, more than 100 soldiers from the security forces stepped forward. They carried man-portable crossbows. These security troops are divided into two groups, each with more than 50 soldiers. One of them aimed their crossbows in Luffy's direction. The soldiers aimed their crossbows at Luffy. At this time, Luffy continued to knock down some security troops to the ground. After knocking down dozens of people one after another, he saw more than 50 soldiers aiming at him with crossbows. A crossbow, Luffy said with a strange expression on his face. No matter how reckless Luffy is, he also knows the power of the crossbow. Among the great roots and the world, gunpowder weapons are the mainstream. However, the crossbow, as an ancient weapon, is still used by many killers and even the regular national army. Compared with gunpowder firearms, bows and crossbows don't have to worry about moisture, but the shooting speed is slower, and it takes a longer time to reinstall the bow and arrow. But the penetrating power of the bow and arrow shot by the crossbow is much stronger than that of many ordinary or old firearms. Most importantly, the bows and arrows fired by the crossbow cannot be resisted by some bulletproof armor made of leather and light metal. Take aim, said Colonel Goldenbeard. More than 50 soldiers aimed their crossbows at Luffy. Shoot, said Colonel Goldenbeard. Swish 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 swish. The soldiers holding the crossbow buckled the mechanism of the crossbow, and the bows and arrows shot at Luffy together. Luffy flopped down and started rolling. If he was shot with so many bows and arrows, he would definitely become a hornet's nest. Luffy quickly dodged. Fortunately, this time it was a volley, and Luffy got down in time, almost causing the bows and arrows to pass over him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 544. ID Con 1695484. Goldenbeard saw that Luffy had dodged these bows and arrows, so he quickly asked the first group of soldiers to retreat and replace them with more than 50 soldiers holding crossbows. For this shooting, pay attention to every 10 people shooting every few seconds, and shoot after judging the opponent's position. At the same time, the first batch of bows and arrows should be reloaded as soon as possible, Colonel Goldenbeard said. Yes, Colonel Goldbeard. This second group of more than 50 soldiers began to attack separately. Every 10 soldiers aim at Luffy and shoot first. Swish 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 swish. The bows and arrows shot at Luffy, and he quickly dodged. But every 10 bows and arrows were fired at short intervals, and Luffy felt exhausted. Still a bow and arrow hit Luffy's body. Luffy howled in pain. He was shot with a bow and arrow in the left thigh. 2 more bow and arrows grazed the right side of his torso. Although they missed, they also caused obvious scratches. Luffy was killed, and he really has nothing to do with these bows and arrows now. Luffy saw Rog's side. After Rog defeated Dariguez, he was in a fierce battle with some security forces with shotguns. Luffy hurried towards Rog. At this time, Rog wielded the iron birch sword and fought fiercely with these enemies. Boom! With a harsh sound, a security force soldier opened fire on Rog's body with a shotgun. The walnut armor on Rog's body was hit with bursts of sparks. But Rog's walnut armor is still basically intact. It's just that there are some slight cracks on it. Why can't we kill him? The security soldier said in horror. It's your turn. Rog brandished the iron birch sword and aimed at his chest, slashing at him. Puff! Rog swung the iron birch sword and cut a huge wound diagonally from top to bottom on the chest of the security army soldier. Even the heart and lungs inside were exposed, and blood was scattered everywhere. Even Rog's walnut armor was soaked in more blood. The security force soldier fell to the ground covered in blood. And Rog's series of slashings had already killed more than security troops with his iron birch sword. These security forces are all miserable. Some heads have been moved. Hurry and retreat, this guy is difficult to deal with. The security forces soldiers retreated together. Rog looked around, and the slashing made Rog's blood boil. Luffy suddenly rushed over. Roger, can you think of a way? Help me deal with those bows and arrows, Luffy shouted. Luffy quickly hid behind Roger. At this time, 10 bows and arrows suddenly shot at Rog. Clang clang clang. Several bows and arrows hit the walnut armor on Rog's body, but they were all bounced off, and some of them broke directly because of excessive force. Rog looked in the direction of the bow and arrow. I saw dozens of soldiers holding crossbows aiming at this place to shoot. Rog quickly understood, and he said, it turns out that it is like this. If this is the case, Luffy, your body must be very afraid of these extremely penetrating bows and arrows. Because Luffy's body is made of rubber, it can expand and contract freely, and it can rebound many weapons. Bullets and cannonballs in the shape of balls can rebound, as can some irregular cubes and cuboid objects. But once it encounters a sharp weapon, it cannot rebound. So sharp weapons are Luffy's nemesis. Rog also felt a headache seeing so many soldiers using bows and crossbows in the enemy. It seems to be a real headache. Luffy, let's do this. You should find a way to attack by throwing objects at a remote position first, so that all enemies using bows and crossbows will be knocked down before approaching the battle, Rog said. After hearing this, Luffy said, "Okay." He quickly ran towards an area farther away. There are many stones in this vast garden, and Luffy used them to attack when he saw those things. Luffy puts a large rock in place, and he stands behind. Rubber. Bazooka. Luffy first stretched his arms far behind him, and then pushed forward with all his might. The huge thrust knocked the large rocks into the air, hitting the security forces with bows and crossbows like heavy artillery shells. These security forces looked at the large rocks flying above their heads in horror. Boom! There was a loud noise. 4 security forces soldiers were smashed into meat paste. More than a dozen soldiers of the security forces around were also rushed away by the impact of the large stone. The other security forces soldiers had a look of fear on their faces. This kind of death is too miserable. The soldiers of the security army with bows and crossbows quickly lost their formation. Luffy continued to use this method to smash big rocks over. The security forces turned their backs on their backs. The security forces who originally held bows and crossbows quickly suffered heavy casualties. Seeing this situation, the Golden Beard Colonel was sweating anxiously. Their strength is so powerful. Colonel Goldbeard said in surprise. Now every attack of the security forces can be cracked by Roger and Luffy. But just as Luffy kept throwing large stones at the security forces, Rog rushed towards the security forces wielding the iron birch sword. Although the security forces were numerous in number, they were intimidated by the 2 men's strong fighting power, and their morale declined. Some of them tended to retreat. Just because I was worried about military law, I reluctantly persisted here. Colonel Goldenbeard shouted loudly, "Hold still, don't panic and continue to fight back." The security forces started shooting at Rog with guns, and those with crossbows shot in the direction of Luffy. However, because of the long distance on Luffy's side, Luffy can avoid it, and Luffy can also use the big stones he used to block the bows and arrows. Rog faced a hail of bullets from the security forces. Machine guns, shotguns, submachine guns, and rifles all shoot bullets at Roger. Under the attack of these dense bullets, countless sparks sputtered from the walnut armor on Rog's body. The ear-piercing friction sound also resounded around. However, apart from adding some insignificant cracks on the outside of the walnut armor, these did not cause greater damage to the walnut armor. Rog had only one idea in mind, to rush into a place where the enemy was dense. Although I have seen Rog's powerful combat power, there are still some capable officers in the security forces who stand in the way. More than a dozen officers rushed towards Rog with sabers in hand. Rog wielded the great iron birch sword and fought fiercely with the opponent. An officer slashed at him with a sharp saber. Rog met it with the iron birch sword and chopped it off. Chong! The officer's saber was cut off. Whether it is weight, sharpness, or hardness, the iron birch sword is a saber that surpasses the opponent. Moreover, although the saber was sharp and even more flexible, it was relatively slender, so it was cut off when it met the iron birch sword head-on. "My saber!" the security officer said in horror. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 545. ID Con 1696143. Rog didn't let go of the security officer's thoughts, and the iron birch sword in his hand continued to slash towards the officer's neck. Puff! The iron birch sword that Rog clenched in both hands chopped off the head of the security officer. The security officer's head rolled to the ground. Other officers of the security force also rushed towards Rog. Rog swung the iron birch sword and continued to kill. The officers of the security forces rushed over together, and Rog swung the iron birch sword at the chest of another officer of the security forces and hacked. Puff! The security officer's chest was cut open, and blood flew everywhere. The heart was also severely injured. The mortally wounded vigilante officer fell to the ground. An officer of the security force took the opportunity to brandish a saber and stab Rog in the belly of the walnut armor. But it was just a harsh rubbing sound. The saber just collided violently on the walnut armor, because the friction produced sparks. He failed to pierce Rog's walnut armor with his saber, and Rog swung his iron birch sword and slashed at the security officer's abdomen. Puff! Rog swung the iron birch sword and sliced open the security officer's abdomen. All the intestines in the abdomen of the vigilante leaked out. Ah, ah! The security officer whose abdomen was cut open clutched his stomach in pain and fell down. He continued to groan and twitch on the ground for a while. Rog continued to fight wielding the great iron birch sword. One by one, the officers of the security forces came forward. Rog swung the iron birch sword and beheaded the officers of the security forces. The security forces fell one by one, while Rog continued to fight bravely. With solid walnut armor and a sharp iron birch sword, Rog charged bravely. In the end, Rog rushed to the machine gun positions of the security forces. More than 40 machine guns all discovered Rog's threat, and they all fired violently at Rog. The walnut armor on Rog's body was covered by a hail of bullets. No matter what, I can't destroy this enemy. It's obviously just walnut armor, but it can't be destroyed. How could it be so powerful? Many of the security forces soldiers who manipulated the machine guns were shocked. The walnut armor Rog wore was extremely hard. The bullets shot up basically without any damage. Individual bullets can only add very small cracks. But relying on the extremely hard walnut armor, Rog still continued to charge bravely. Rog swung the iron birch sword and aimed at the security forces manipulating machine guns. Rog swung the iron birch sword and chopped off the heads of the security forces soldiers who were manipulating machine guns, splitting their bodies. The security forces who were killed by Rog with this kind of close-quarters fighting were turned upside down. Just as Rog bravely wielded the great iron birch sword to fight, Luffy kept bouncing the huge stones away, and these huge stones killed many security forces. There were originally more than 100 soldiers in the security force armed with crossbows. After Luffy bombarded them with large rocks, they were all defeated. The remaining ones are also unable to form large-scale attacks. Finally we killed them all, Luffy said. Now that the most threatening security forces armed with crossbows were killed, Luffy stopped throwing large rocks and began to charge towards the security forces. Luffy quickly rushed to the security forces and began to fight vigorously. After being shot by those law and order soldiers who used crossbows just now, Luffy felt very painful. Now it is finally time to severely punish these security forces. Rubber. Machine gun. Luffy punched more than 10 punches in a row. These fists hit the vigilantes. What? Hateful. More than a dozen security forces were shot in the head or chest and fell to the ground. This is not over yet, Luffy is a further and more powerful attack. Rubber. Tempest. This time Luffy punched harder, hitting dozens of punches in a row. More than 20 vigilantes were hit and fell to the ground. Luffy attacked violently like this, knocking down a large number of officers and soldiers of the security forces. Just as Luffy and Roger were fighting fiercely with the security forces outside the Grandet Mansion. Inside the Grandet Mansion, Sanji and Robin are constantly exploring and fighting. Just now Sanji and Robin entered this mansion together. After entering the mansion, I still encountered some enemies, and Sanji and Robin eliminated them all. The Grandet Mansion has 5 floors. Sanji and Robin have been fighting from the first floor to the second floor. A security guard was kicked away again. Robin crossed his arms and activated the flowering fruit ability. Two-wheeled flower. Choking. 8 security forces armed with submachine guns were targeting the two, but a pair of white and slender female arms quickly grew out of their backs. What? What is this? When the security forces were still extremely shocked, the arms that grew out quickly grabbed the heads of the 8 security forces. Then the arms snapped the security guards' heads back. Click, 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 click. The harsh sound of bones breaking resounded in the corridor on the second floor of the mansion. The necks of these 8 security guards were broken from behind. Then the bodies of the 8 security forces either fell forward, backward, or to the sides. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The triggers of the submachine guns in the hands of several security forces were also pressed and fired indiscriminately. There are still some remaining security forces in the corridor on the second floor. 3 more security forces suddenly rushed out of the room on one side. First-class minced meat. Sanji jumped over quickly, jumping up and kicking his feet violently for a while. 3 security forces were knocked to the ground by intensive kicks. Another security force suddenly rushed out of a room and threw a long-handled lead grenade at Sanji. It's just that this long-handled fuse grenade has been pulled out of the fuse, and sparks and white smoke are blowing up. Before the long-handled fuse grenade landed, Sanji just kicked it up. "Give it back to you," Sanji said calmly. The long-handled fuse grenade that was pulled was kicked back into the room where the security forces came out of. Crap. Oops. Throw it out quickly. There is obviously more than one security force in this room. They all planned to charge after the long-handled fuse grenade exploded. Boom. A violent explosion sounded. The security forces in this room fell to the ground in a bloody mess. There are 40 doors on both sides of the corridor on the second floor. There are enemies hidden in some rooms inside. They will rush out soon after they find out that they have been invaded. However, most of the enemies that came out of the room where the enemies rushed out were quickly eliminated by Sanji and Robin. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 546. ID Con 1696159. A very small number of people who were scared out of their wits or other waiters did not dare to come out to die. Sanji looked at the corpses in the corridor, some of them were knocked out. "I think I need to find someone to ask where Grandet is now," Sanji said. Robin crossed his arms again and said, "No need to bother." Robin once again used a powerful move that allowed him to monitor his surroundings, and was dazzled. Dazzled. A human eye suddenly appeared on the roof of the surrounding rooms, as deep as Robin's eyes. Not only on the second floor, but also on the roofs of the rooms on the third floor above. In a room on the third floor of the mansion, Grandet was shivering under the protection of a group of bodyguards in suits. Grandet himself has no fighting power, he is just a cunning businessman and speculator. But he relied on a lot of money to bought a group of powerful bodyguards and a huge security force for his use. Now that he knows that this place has been attacked to such an extent, can he not feel afraid? One of these bodyguards in suits was tall and thin with sharp cheeks and eagle eyes. He said to Grandet, "Mayor Grandet, it's okay for you to be so scared now. You should rest assured of our strength. After all, Grandet has experienced some turbulent waves. Although he has been in a high position for many years, he still quickly stabilized his mood with the shrewdness in his bones." He reluctantly cheered up and said, "Maget, I believe in your strength. As my bodyguards, I can't trust your strength anymore." The tall and thin man named Magath was the captain of Grandet's bodyguards. This elite bodyguard is also the last barrier after the security forces are defeated. Luffy looked at the corpse of the King Seagull on the Discovery again. Luffy said to Sanji, "Sanji, prepare to cook this giant seagull." Sanji looked at King Seagull and said, "It's really a glutton. But I should work hard to cook for the ladies." Thinking of this, Sanji immediately fell into extreme joy. but cutting such a huge king seagull still needs help. Sanji then said to the others, I need someone to cut it. You guys can help too. Okay, everyone said. Rog, Sauron, and the King of Ninja came forward to help. Because Luffy is too clumsy, Sanji just asks him to help with some sundries. Rog took out the great iron birch sword and swung it to cut the king seagull. Of course, it goes without saying that Sauron and the King of Ninjas are the same. In particular, Sauron's cutting of the body of the king seagull can be said to be surprisingly efficient. After seeing Zoro's astonishing efficiency, Sanji also praised, Green Algae Head is really a good helper. After cutting off the head, tail, and claws of the king seagull, they threw it into the sea. The remaining feathers are plucked out, but these seagull feathers are huge and can be used to make some items. The remaining body of the seagull became 2 huge seagull legs, 2 huge seagull wings, and the torso of the seagull that was cut into several large pieces. The seagull meat was transported back to the cabin kitchen below. Although the upper deck of the Discovery was severely damaged, many of the deeper cabins below were still intact. The galley is in the deeper cabin. In the cabin, Sanji was cooking enthusiastically. Others also serve as help cooks. Sanji sang while preparing the condiments. La 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 Sanji, the top chef, cooked a delicious seagull dinner. Miss Nami was happy, the girls couldn't smile from ear to ear. Robin, that's when I fell in love with Sanji. Sauron, who was helping the cook here, snorted disdainfully after hearing this. Rog and Usopp were not surprised and continued to work. At this moment, footsteps came. It turned out that Nami and Robin had arrived in the kitchen. Sanji looked at the two of them and said with a smile, Ah, Miss Nami, Sister Robin, you are here. Nami said, Ah, it's Robin who thinks you're working hard. Wants to help. So I'm here too. Robin looked at Sanji and said, I'm sorry for making you work so hard. Sanji immediately said respectfully, no matter how hard a gentleman should work for a lady, he should work hard without any hesitation. When saying this, Sanji also turned his body and made a gesture of love. Robin said, I'll do some work anyway. Sanji said, Miss Robin is so persistent, then you should join too. Robin walked over to a pile of dishes. I used to squeeze in a lot of plates, bowls, and cups that needed to be washed. Robin stood before the dishes and cutlery that needed to be washed. 8 round flowers. Blooming. Robin crossed his arms and activated the flowering fruit ability. Suddenly 8 arms grew from Robin's body. The 8 arms then started in 4 pairs and started washing the plates and cutlery. Nami praised, Robin, your method is really efficient. Robin said, it's a small thing. Nami also started to help. But she soon acted like a conductor, directing everyone how to work. Nami is sometimes more of a real captain than Luffy. The kitchen is lively, and everyone is working together. It was afternoon again. Near the bow deck under the setting sun, everyone enjoyed dinner together. This time on the dining table, amazingly huge seagull meat was served. It's so delicious, Usopp said as he wolfed down the food. Bah, haha, it's delicious, Luffy said with his mouth full of food. Luffy also felt that there was not enough food on the plate in front of him, so he often stretched out his rubber arms to eat meat from the plate in front of other people. Sanji said dissatisfiedly, really, you are a glutton. Robin also smiled lightly after seeing Luffy eating. Sanji quickly said to Robin with a loving face, get used to it. Luffy here is very greedy. So don't eat too slowly. Roger and Chopper also ate seagull sandwiches and drank special drinks together. Of course, how could there be no ice cubes on this feast? Before dinner, the goddess of springs used magic to create enough ice cubes for everyone to enjoy. Zoro and the Ninja King drank ice-cold rum and ate grilled seagull steaks. The meat on the king seagull's body is so huge that it doesn't take much effort to pick out the bones. Except for Robin and a few other ladies present, everyone else was munching on the food. Laughter filled the deck of the Discovery. After the feast, everyone rested leisurely on the deck. "Okay, would you like to drink some coconut juice after dinner?" Rog asked. "Want to?" Usopp, Luffy, and Chopper yelled. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 547. ID Con 1696655. Sanji and Robin prepare for the final battle to capture Grandet. Outside the Grandet mansion, Roger and Luffy continued to fight fiercely with the security forces. Due to the continuous defeats of the troops commanded by Colonel Goldenbeard, the commander of the Fourth Army, Koraz, received the order and just came. The head of the Koraz army led 1,000 light cavalry and infantry from the Fourth Army to rush to help here, and the carriage also brought some heavy weapons. The head of the Koraz army, who was riding on a tall horse, led an army to help here. After he and the infantry, cavalry, and carriages of the Fourth Army arrived in the center of the city, they saw the Grandet mansion and the huge nearby yard where the battle was ongoing. "It's actually like this here," Koraz said with emotion. He also saw how the Grandet mansion was caught in a net of thorns. According to Grandet's urgent request for help, Koraz hurriedly led his army to help. After arriving here, they found that the hundreds of elite soldiers commanded by Colonel Goldenbeard had suffered extremely heavy losses and were almost completely defeated. The commander of the Kolas army stopped his horse at the entrance of the huge courtyard outside the courtyard of the Grandet mansion and began to issue orders. "All troops, prepare to fight," the commander of Koraz Corps ordered in a rich voice. "Obey the Legion commander." More than 1,000 officers and soldiers shouted in unison. The security officers and soldiers of the 4th Legion quickly began to load their rifles and draw their sabers in preparation for battle. The carriage stopped and put down the machine guns and field artillery it was carrying. The cavalry took the lead, ready to charge. "Enter the courtyard," commander of the Koraz Legion ordered. He personally led the cavalry into the huge courtyard of the Grandet mansion. The courtyard around the Grandet mansion is huge, comparable to a square, and full of trees, flowers, and plants. The reason why it was originally constructed in this way was to make the surrounding area appear very vast and avoid the possible danger of assassination. The commander of the Kolas army led more than 1,000 elite officers and soldiers one after another into this huge courtyard. At this time, Roger and Luffy continued to fight fiercely with the security forces commanded by Colonel Goldenbeard. Now the security forces are beaten to pieces. With the decrease in number, the security forces are in a more disadvantageous situation. Rog swung the iron birch sword and slashed fiercely, completely destroying the security forces' machine gun positions and small mortar positions. Luffy made full use of his flexible and stretchable body to knock down a large number of security forces. The Goldenbeard held a saber in his hand, but he was also very frightened. His whole body was trembling, although he also had some skills, but it was better than ordinary soldiers, but he had no chance of winning against either Rog or Luffy. At most, you can carry it a few more times and you will be killed or injured. At this time, Goldenbeard heard the sound of the horseshoes of the Fourth Army. He looked excitedly at the troops of the Fourth Army coming in from the gate of the huge courtyard. Support finally arrived. Colonel Goldbeard was overjoyed. He commanded his subordinates to fight hard, and they were already tortured to the point of collapse. At this time, the reinforcements of the Fourth Army commanded by the commander of the Kolas army finally arrived. He shouted happily, "Brothers, our reinforcements are coming." The colonel with the golden beard quickly rushed towards the commander of the Koras army. The colonel with the golden beard was sweating profusely and rushed to the commander of the Koras army. The more than security forces under him who were still able to move finally collapsed, and they were extremely happy and ran for their lives in the direction of the supporting troops. Rog and Luffy did not pursue, but looked at the groups of corpses and wounded and fainted enemies around them, and at the 4th Legion that came to support them. "Are there so many again?" Rog said calmly. "Keep fighting," Luffy said excitedly. The colonel with the golden beard fled desperately to the horse of the commander of the Korra's army. The commander of the Korra's army stopped the horse. He looked at the colonel with the golden beard, who looked embarrassed. The golden beard colonel also panted and raised his head. He looked at the tall and burly commander of the Korra's army on horseback. The commander of the Korra's legion has a resolute and calm middle-aged face, with a cross scar on the right side of his face. Appears more sturdy. Korras looked at Colonel Goldenbeard, and then glanced at the more than 100 remnants of the security forces who retreated with Colonel Goldenbeard. The colonel with the golden beard raised his hand in a military salute very respectfully. The commander of the Korra's army, the colonel with the golden beard, and the troops of the mansion have fought desperately against the enemy. Now we finally get your support. Please join the army commander and the officers and soldiers of the 4th Army as soon as possible. Colonel Goldenbeard said very respectfully. The commander of the Kohla's army glared at him with disdain and said sternly, "Why fight desperately but when I saw you running away?" Hearing the words of the commander of the Korra's army, the Goldenbeard colonel and the rout soldiers behind him were very frightened. The commander of the Kohla's corps said to the 2 officers on the left and right, "The commander of the public relations force, Colonel Jinbeard, escaped from the battlefield and engaged in military law. Behead him in public." "Obey," said the 2 officers. The 2 officers drew their sabers at their waists and steered their horses towards the colonel with the golden beard. The colonel with the golden beard was terrified, and instinctively brandished his saber to prepare to resist. Clang, his saber exchanged with the officer's saber rushing over from the right. But he couldn't defend the left side. The officer on the left rushed over with his horse, and took advantage of his speed to cut off Colonel Goldenbeard's neck with one blow. Puff! Colonel Goldenbeard's head flew up, and blood spurted out from the center of his neck. After Colonel Goldenbeard was beheaded, the more than defeated soldiers originally under his command were horrified, and some were so frightened that they collapsed to the ground. An officer picked up the head of Colonel Goldbeard from the ground, and then steered the horse, while raising his head with one hand to the side of the commander of the Korra's army. "Legion commander, his head is here," the officer said respectfully. The head of the Korra's legion nodded slightly, and looked contemptuously at the face of the golden-bearded colonel who was dying. "Okay, let's show them the head of the Korra's army," said. This officer showed the head of Colonel Goldenbeard to the more than 100 defeated soldiers and the supporting troops for viewing. This bloody head gave the security forces a great shock. The Goldenbeard colonel was beheaded very neatly. Strictly speaking, in accordance with the command system, the commander of the Korra's army and Colonel Goldenbeard are not affiliated. Although the number of troops commanded by Colonel Goldbeard was small, he was in charge of guarding the very important Grandet Mansion. To some extent, it is on the same level as the commander of the Korra's army who commands a main force. It's just that the status is slightly different on the surface, but in fact there is no absolute huge gap. In other words, without the permission of General Duran, the commander-in-chief of the security forces, the head of the Korra's army has no power to execute Colonel Goldbeard. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 548. ID Con 1696656. Even Colonel Goldenbeard completely wiped out the troops under his command without major crimes. After all, the enemy's strength lies there. However, Colonel Goldenbeard should never have done anything wrong, but when the elite soldiers of the 4th Army led by the leader of the Korra's army arrived, they immediately fled. Although this may not change the battle situation, but in terms of morale, it undoubtedly dealt a great blow to his remnant soldiers and supporting troops. In this case, the commander of the Korra's army is absolutely unbearable. Therefore, he could directly order Colonel Goldenbeard to be executed. Korras rode up to more than 100 broken soldiers who were originally Colonel Goldenbeard's men. The defeated soldiers looked at him in horror. Among the security forces, the commander of the Kora's army is known for his ruthlessness. Once he felt it was okay, he would have no problem killing as many people as possible, including his own. The commander of the Kora's army ruthlessly looked at the group of defeated soldiers. Your rout on the battlefield was all due to the leadership of Colonel Goldenbeard. The responsibility lies with him, so he has been executed on the spot. But you soldiers, facing a strong enemy, fought bravely until now, and you deserve credit. But you escaped from the battle. You are also guilty. Now I am issuing an order as a security force, and you will be incorporated into the Fourth Army. Continue to fight against the enemy. After victory, the guilt will be forgotten, and you will be rewarded. The leader of the Kora's army said forcefully. After hearing this, the faces of the more than 100 defeated soldiers changed drastically. Then they cheered. Obey the Legion commander. The more than 100 defeated soldiers cheered happily. Although the battle is very dangerous, the reality is here. If you don't fight, you will only be dealt with by military law. And continuing to fight now is the support force of the Fourth Army under the command of the commander of the Kora's army. The advantage of continuing to fight is not small. The commander of the Kolas Corps ordered, 4th Corps, prepare to fight. Prepare field artillery. Obey. The soldiers of the Fourth Army quickly set up more than a dozen field guns pulled by the carriage. Because the matter was urgent, only lightly armed troops were dispatched. So the heavy firepower is only these dozen or so field guns. The soldiers of the security forces quickly loaded the shells of the field artillery. After the field guns were loaded, the soldiers adjusted the muzzles to aim at Roger and Luffy. The leader of the Kolas Corps looked at the two of them. Of course, the hundreds of security forces who were knocked to the ground around Rog and Luffy were also in his eyes. Obviously these two people are not easy to deal with. Kolas ordered the artillerymen, fire. The artillerymen pulled the cords of the field guns, and then the cannons rang out violently. Boom 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 boom. More than a dozen shells were fired and flew towards Rog and Luffy. A violent explosion covered Rog's surroundings. Luffy saw the cannonball coming. Rubber balloon Luffy suddenly expanded his body into a huge balloon, and then tried to bounce the cannonballs. But just after Luffy touched a cannonball, the cannonball exploded violently. Boom! Luffy was blown far away, and because his stomach was full of air, he bounced off the ground like a really huge balloon. Luffy finally spits out all the air in his mouth. He sat on the ground, gasped and stood up. How come these shells explode when they hit objects? Luffy said in surprise. The shells of the field guns used by the security forces are bombs with impact fuses, which explode when they collide with objects. Luffy often uses rubber balloons and body stretching to bounce shells, but once he encounters this kind of shells that hit the fuse, there is no way. Rog was violently covered by shells. Rog was already surrounded by flames and smoke. The hard walnut armor on his body successfully resisted the damage of the explosion. After this round of shelling, Rog was still standing there. The leader of the Kolas Corps looked at Rog and Luffy. Especially Rog, who was still standing in such a violent attack. It is indeed an enemy with some strength. Well, the field artillery all use incendiary shells. The commander of the Kora's Legion gave the order. The artillerymen quickly reloaded the field guns with fresh shells. This time the shells they loaded were incendiary shells. Fire! The commander of the Kora's Legion gave the order. Boom 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 boom. The artillerymen manning the field guns pulled the cords. More than a dozen incendiary shells were fired. These incendiary shells cover Roger and Luffy. Boom, 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 boom. The shells not only exploded themselves, but also caused a huge flame. A huge flame envelopes Roger and Luffy. Oops, retreat quickly, Rog said. Although Rog's walnut armor has been modified and is not afraid of flames, he will be roasted if he stays here. And those burning smoke is also choking. It's so hot. Luffy was in even more pain and ran to the back like a duck. At this time, near the Grandet mansion, a carriage drove quickly. There are also several horses with burly attendants. The carriage stopped at last at the gate of the great courtyard of the Grandet mansion. Why do you keep going in? A young woman's voice came from inside the carriage. The coachman hurriedly said in embarrassment, Miss Eugenie, there is a battle going on inside. We can't go any further. At this time, a fierce battle was going on in the huge courtyard of Grandet mansion, with smoke and fire raging here. A large number of security forces are fighting with Rog and Luffy here. The door of the carriage was pushed open, and Eugenie stepped out in a blue dress. Eugenie shook her beautiful long brown wavy hair, and a pair of blue eyes looked at the Grandet mansion and the huge surrounding yard full of war. The attendants also dismounted. Father! Eugenie quickly rushed in from the entrance of the giant courtyard. Miss, you can't go. Several burly attendants quickly stood around her. Eugenie was very anxious and wanted to rush out. She, who has always been kind-hearted, also said sternly, don't you listen to what I say. These attendants all had ugly faces. One of the oldest middle-aged people looked at Eugenie very calmly. Miss, your safety is very important. If your father knew that you actually took such a risk, he would definitely be very painful, the middle-aged man said seriously. Eugenie looked at him, calmed down and said, Xiaowen, as the old housekeeper of the Grandet family, I know you have good intentions. But my father's current life and death, what on earth should I do? Eugenie also knew that she might not be of much help. But she really wanted to see for herself that her father was finally safe.